I'm Julia Gentry, and along with my husband, Travis Gentry, we discuss real, raw, and not small talk conversations about faith, family, entrepreneurship, and all the things that matter most in this life. This is the Dream On podcast.
Welcome to the Dream On podcast. So we like to start each podcast with asking each other a question. It can be funny, it can be serious. It's just off the cuff so you can get to know us a little bit more. So today I'm going to ask Julie a question. And my question is, why do we live in Bentonville, Arkansas?
I should stop allowing you to ask the question. Why not, Travis?
No, you got to give me a little bit more than that. We've lived in Florida, Arizona, Colorado, Oregon. We've traveled the country in an RV, and now we live in Bentonville, Arkansas. And I get this question, like how long have you lived here? And why'd you move here? And you're like, it stumps me kind of every time because I'm trying to come up with different angles to it.
Depending on who you're talking
to.
Depending
on who I talk to, or if I want to keep it short, or so why. If someone asks you, or why do we live in Bentonville, Arkansas?
Well, if I wanted to keep it short, I would use my husband's dying words. Why not? Legitimately, I've actually watched you answer someone with that way, and they look at you like you're going to tell them more, and that's really all that you say.
Or I'll say, I'm just living my dream.
It's like this awkward pause that they're waiting for more. Okay, so my real answer would be, I would say in the last 7 years, our traveling first was for just adventure and to kind of break patterns and habits and live into our dream. Then I would say after RV, we shifted into Airbnb, and then we lived in Florida for about 8 months, and then we lived in Bend for about 15 months. And at that point, I was feeling ready. I'm done doing this. The full-time travel is actually harder than it is fun. It's lost the grace. I'll put it that way. We just had a grace bubble every single time we did hard things, and it's just lost the grace. And I just wasn't convinced 125% that it was Bend. 100% probably, but not 125%. And so it felt
so that's why we've lived there 3 times.
That's not the question.
Trying it on, testing it.
It's not how many times we've gone back to Bend. The question is, why are we in Bentonville? So I feel like it was a little bit of one more Hail Mary, a little bit of all the research that we did.
Meaning the research I did.
And a little bit of just blindly going, why not? It sounds like a good idea. And so here we are.
In Bentonville, Arkansas.
Why I'm here in Bentonville, Arkansas.
We should do a podcast on, as we're talking about this, we should do a podcast specifically on the pros and the cons of moving, because we homeschool, we're self-employed, and you have the entities and the taxes and all the things that go into that. Like you said, we've done everything, and we haven't lived in one place for more than 1 year. Over the last 7 years.
Yeah. But this last time in Bend was the longest.
Yeah, which was 14
14
months.
14.35.
So we were getting the itch. We had to get out of there. But there is a whole different dynamic being self-employed and taxes and moving around, but homeschooling and just all the logistics. So I feel like we could kind of give some bullet points for people that are at the beginning of their journey of looking at, hey, I want to travel, I want to experience different things, of what I would do in preparation to be able to go wherever.
Great. So we'll do that. But first,
stay tuned.
Before we give you a series on what to do and not to do, we are going to start a new series that we'll just surprise you with. It's not actually in order. We'll just pop it in and out throughout the series or throughout the season. And the series is called The Power of Words. Your Words Matter. Now, Travis and I hit on this a couple of episodes ago where we were not intending to talk about the power of one word, but when we used the word change, immediately within 2.5 minutes of talking, he and I realized, we're talking about the same word, but we have very different interpretations and emotional responses to that word. So here in my dreamer hat, if you're watching, it's a beautiful hat that you can only buy at the Dare to Dream conference, brought to you by us. But it's our dreamer hat. In this hat is the sticky words that most people are asking in Google search right now.
Yes. And so why this is so fascinating and so important, whether you are talking to your spouse, you're talking to your kids, you're in a business with a business partner, the words that you use can mean something totally different. And we talked about it a few few episodes ago, as far as like, you should ask your partner, or whether it's your spouse or your kids or whatever, when you're saying a word and talking about something, and it maybe is a big subject that you're talking about, to identify and understand what their interpretation, what the meaning is behind it.
Yeah.
And so I know a few of the words. Julia obviously wrote down the words, but we're just going to pull random words. And the first thing that comes to our minds is what it is. We haven't talked about it, so I don't know what she thinks about some of these words, and vice versa. So,
and once we pull the words, the idea is the exercise for you too, is to stimulate conversations with those that you do life with. So if you are married, grab your spouse and ask them what this word means to them. If you're raising babies, whether they're 3, 7, or 5, like, ask them, what is this word to you? What does this word mean to you? And that, like Travis mentioned, even if you're running a team, leading a team, running a business, again, the power of these words is incredible, hysterical, ironic, challenging, and everything.
it could be just such a fun game.
It's just fun.
For Thanksgiving or Christmas. You get a bunch of words in there and you pull it out, and then your family members get to say what that word means. And some of these words could be a little controversial.
So buckle up, baby.
All right.
You get to pull the first word and show the audience, so that way they know we're not cheating.
Can you see it?
Wealth.
What does it mean to you?
Let's talk about wealth.
What does it
mean? Wealth, to me, would mean more than just how much money I have in the bank. Wealth to me would mean the accumulation of what I know, what I've built, what I've received in output of my value. That's what I would just tell you.
This is going to be, because this is going to be fun, because like you're like thinking through, like you're processing out loud. You're saying,
I'm a verbal processor.
I know, but like instantly, wealth means freedom to me, period. Like freedom.
Well, good for
freedom
you.
of choice. I know, but this is the fun part of it, is that like you're like saying all these angles and stuff like that, and the meaning can mean something so different. So wealth is freedom to me. Yeah. Freedom of choice, freedom of time. Like if I have wealth, I can do what I want, when I want, with whom I want.
Okay.
So I just think this is going to be so interesting as we pull out and look at these different words of the interpretation behind them.
Yeah. So I'm not done though. I'm still.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm done.
I'm really glad that you know what the word means. You know what's actually funny about this though? The other day, it was a word that I was teaching Aslan, and it was one of those words. I wish I could think of what it was, because it was a word that was so logical, but she did not know what it meant. And so I was like trying to describe what it meant without actually stating the word again.
Is there a game that you do that, where you have like the word or whatever, and you have to describe it?
Yeah, it's like Pictionary. Is that what it is? Anyways, so this is, to me, it's like one of those things in my head. I know what wealth is, but I'm having a hard time saying what it is. I think that wealth is it's internal and external. So it's like my internal ability to process information, and then my ability to use it in a way that creates like substance in the world around me. So it's not just money in the bank. It's like accumulated knowledge that equates into like tactical results. And so that over the course of my life and over the course of what I'm doing, it's like the input and output exchange. So almost like how I would say this for you, you say this all the time around that money is a result of the value you give. Mm-hmm. And so if I have learned a lot, I'm able to give a lot. And when I give well, right, then money is a byproduct. Mm-hmm. And so for me, wealth is a higher level. It's like, it's not just money. It's like the input and output of information into transformation. That to me is what wealth is. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just about money. It's about that I'm like wealthy in my body. I'm wealthy in my marriage. Like it actually encompasses all of life, not just money.
Yeah.
which is why I think that people can make money, but we actually struggle being wealthy because we're just trying to make money and we don't understand that wealth is a internal and an external formula that they have to be working together. I'm sweating. You guys, I'm sweating because he's looking at me like, get to the end of your sentence as fast as you possibly. This is what it feels like to be, for a verbal processor, to be married to an internal
10 minutes.
processor.
We're going to get to 3 words today.
Someone's life was just changing. Someone please just, in the comments below, would you just let me know whose definition has just changed your life? My turn. We moving on.
Sure.
Anything else you want to add, or did you summarize
No,
that?
that was it.
One word. All right, my turn. And the word of the day is trauma. Trauma.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, Mr. Quick to share.
Okay, so I think trauma can be internal or external. So that's what it means to me. Trauma external, obviously, if you get hurt doing something, and then internal trauma as far as experiences that traumatize you from an emotional state.
And so when you hear the word trauma, I want to talk about this because actually this is a word that is used very much in our circle of clientele. And it's actually a very sticky word, right? Like in that people mention it a lot. It's obviously highly searched. It's a real thing. So when you hear that word, like, how does it impact your life? What do you think about it when it pertains to life?
Well, I think in that context, it's always internal. Like you wouldn't say, like, unless you said, Susie had, gotten an accident and has trauma. Like obviously, physically something happened to her. So I think we're talking about emotionally.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to me? I mean, it's such, like you said, it can mean so many different things because someone's trauma, whether it's something horrific and they sexually abused or raped or something, to a divorce, to losing a child, to getting fired from a job. Like there's different levels of trauma, but that trauma can be so real to that individual and affect them. As small as someone saying something when you're little and making fun of you, and you hold that trauma because it's like, whether it's the way you dress or your voice or whatever, you smell bad or whatever, and you hold that in for the rest of like your life until you understand the thing under the thing, like what is it that you're holding on to. So I think it is a big word, and everybody's trauma is real to them. And so it's hard to, like, you can't say, well, that trauma is worse than this trauma. Well, it's not, because that trauma is so real to them. They didn't experience your trauma, they experienced their trauma. And so you've got to work through it and understand ultimately where it comes from.
Yeah.
And what happened, what does it mean truly about you, and or not mean about you.
Yeah. That's when I hear that word, fortunately and unfortunately, I think, here's what I don't think trauma is. I think trauma is something that has happened to you, but I think that it becomes an identity. It's a place that people start to hide behind, and it becomes their identity. And so I see trauma as something that happened to you, but what you do with it is a totally different side of the equation. But what happens for most people is that the trauma happens to me, and now I stay behind that wall of trauma, and it becomes me.
Yeah.
And so now I'm actually a byproduct, right? I have my identity based upon the wall, as opposed to learning how to break and to fully heal in the midst of the trauma. And so trauma is one of those things that I feel like becomes a word that, if we're not careful, allows us to keep our guard up, allows us to hide behind, allows us to only cope, but never actually thrive or achieve, the actualization in this life, is because it's the wall that we hide behind, as opposed to something that happened to us, but doesn't have to define us.
Yep. And I think we've had this similar conversation as far as like what you do and all the things that we've worked through. So I would agree with you.
Well, and then the interesting thing about that is I would have never, ever said that I had trauma in my life. I fortunately have had really hard, challenging moments early on, right? When Mal died, that was super traumatic and that was like earth shattering. But when I'm saying these formative years, I would have never said that I had a traumatic experience as a kid. However, when I started to get stuck later in, right, in my late 20s, I started to notice I was hitting these walls that I could not overcome. And so when I went back and did the work, right, that we do in the study and everything that we do through our growth coaching, I realized, Trav, that when my parents got divorced and it felt like a rug was pulled out from underneath me, that even though I was just a statistic and it happens all the time and it's not that big of a deal, like my coping mechanism was to no longer feel. And so I didn't actually know it was trauma, but it was trauma that then I did hide behind. And that's why I think I'm actually kind of crazy passionate about this topic, because I experienced trauma that I would have never called trauma, but I still hid behind that wall for 29 years.
Yeah. It's like a glass wall.
100%.
Like you put this glass barrier there where it's like if something gets too close or whatever, there's a resistance to it, but you can't identify it. You can't see it. It's not brick.
Yep.
It's glass. And so there's this, like, once you run into it or someone runs into it, you know it. There's resistance.
Yeah.
And I think until you've really worked, and we have worked through an understanding how those seeds or how those experiences can be traumatizing to us or start to define who we think we are, which is false most of the time.
Yep.
And then we start acting out a certain way, and then you start to hit that as you get older because it's always there and you don't have anything to identify it with, or like, why do I keep doing this?
That's such an incredible analogy, though, if you really think about it being a glass, because one of the things that I found myself saying all the time is that you can never fully heal if you don't break. And so the idea here is you put this glass wall up where, so it's like, you're right. Like you don't see it, but you keep running up against it, or people keep running up against it. You know, you've been in a relationship. You're like, is it me or is it them? Or like, why the heck does this keep happening every time I'm around this person? Right. So it's like this glass wall, but the only way to actually process that trauma is to break the glass, which is so scary because you're like, I don't want to break again. I don't want to feel that level of pain
It's
again.
vulnerable.
Right. It's vulnerable again. And so, but the minute that breaks, I can finally heal and move on in my life. And so I feel like even this conversation would hopefully be an invitation for someone to kind of like look at that word differently, as not your defining moment, but just a moment that now is right. We have to take responsibility, break, heal, and keep moving.
Yep.
Solid.
It's good.
Okay.
It's good.
You want to do another one?
Yeah.
Eeny, meeny,
Not this one.
miny, mo.
Peace.
Peace.
What does peace mean to you?
That.
Quiet. Doesn't happen very often.
I know, you just looked
at
down
our
at
house
your
with 5 kids.
You just looked down at your phone to see if we were still recording. Oh man, what is peace mean to me? I would have said 4 months ago.
What do you say now?
I just want to invite you to this process because what I'm about to tell you, like I would have said that peace it has more to do with like a peaceful environment, like peace around me. I would have said that peace is the equivalent of a quiet home, right? 5 minutes of silence, getting by myself, right? Like I recharge alone. And so it would have been very much an external thing. And I'm learning actually in more of an uncomfortable fashion right now that though peace externally is important, that peace actually is an internal game, and that I'm actually not really good at it. Like I'm learning more and more that,
like being in a peaceful state.
Yeah, like internally, I actually tend to run like high vibrations and high energy and really intense. And so it feels like the closer I get to like leaning into this word peace, the more I'm having to face the fact that I actually feel like energetically, I'm more charged internally than I would have ever thought. Like truly, even 5 months ago, you might have said, "Are you a peaceful person?" And I would have said, "Sure." But the more that I'm realizing that, and lately I have been invited into finding peace internally, I'm realizing that I actually run at a pretty high intensity, and I lack internal peace more than I would like to admit. Internally, it feels like high voltage a lot of the time.
So what is the word, like, if you were to paint a picture, what is peace? Like, what is
This is it and I'm satisfied. Like it's another word I would say that it's like contentment. It's
Mhm,
like I'm not resisting anything. It's surrender.
mhm,
It's like the storm is around me, but I'm going to still walk on the water towards Jesus. Where before it would have been like I'm either going to not walk on the water because of all the waves,
mhm,
or I'm going to fight against the water. Like
mhm,
I'm the woman, like I'll still get on the water and heck, I will walk towards Jesus, but I'm
mhm,
going to fight the waves and I'm going to get to Jesus, but I'm going to be exhausted and then I'm going to get to Jesus. I'm be like, look, how aren't you proud of me? Because I fought the waves. And he's be like, that's exhausting.
mhm,
Like, are you
mhm,
tired yet? So I feel like peace is a heart posture that's surrendered, fully trusting in the midst of the waves, like not resisting what's happening, not resisting that I feel out of control as a mom, not resisting that the day isn't going the way that I had planned, not resisting the conversation. Like I find that I'm in like resistance to a lot of things that aren't in my control.
mhm.
And so that's a familiar hell. So when I've started to learn about peace, I'm like, I don't really know what this means because I've been like at war more my whole life.
Mhm.
So peace to me would be in real, oh my gosh, thank you for letting me verbally process. It's like a surrendered heart posture that I'm experiencing life, but I'm actually not resisting life, whether I like it or not, whether circumstances are what I want or they're not.
Uh-huh.
I'm just walking on water.
That's good. Do you have more?
I don't think so.
You keep going. I would define peace as, like, looking at any experience and saying, like, that was an experience. Not good or bad, it was just an experience. Couple examples, Nixon on the way home last week, got sick and threw up all over my car and the ground and all that, and I could say, like, I could be different emotions. Like, there's throw up all over my car, it smells, I feel bad for him, all the things, but it's like, it's just an experience. So if I can stay in, like, peaceful state of, like, this is an experience, not good or bad, it's just an experience. Same thing with, like, the world. I can say, like, there's so much going on in the world, and unfortunately, the news the news only gets views if it's negative. And so they they'll get more clicks, they'll get more views, they'll get more showtime if it's something bad. If it's peaceful news, like, no one would really care.
Mhm.
So they have to create conflict and drama, and the governments and the politics and the world, and whatever it may be. It's like there has to be a rub with it,
Mhm.
as opposed to just looking at it and saying, okay, like, if I can do something about it, I'm going to try my best to do something about it, but whatever the result is, it just is.
Mhm.
And then once I know what the result is, then I can take action.
Mhm.
Whether it's a presidency, like, at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's both sides have flaws. And so, yes, if you want one side to win, you vote, you stand up and you vote and you do your best to, you know, make that happen. But if it doesn't, don't be a victim of, well, if that president wasn't in office, then I would be better.
So if you could define, so if Aslan's standing here right now and she's like, yeah, but define peace for me, then how would you define peace?
Inexperience, not good or bad,
Just an experience,
just an
which
experience.
would be trust, like total trust.
Yeah, just like, and the word that is huge for me right now is flow.
Mhm.
Like, living in a flow state. Okay, like, there again, if I'm thinking and asking you as far as a picture, like, peace to me is like, being in the mountains and there's a river, and it's just flowing. Well, if the river gets blocked, it finds a new route. Like, it will go where it needs to go. And so it lives in like flow. It lives in just peace. Okay, here's a hurdle. I'm going to go around it.
But so now if we were to actually try to make, because I think that it would be, that's one of those concepts. And so we're studying about this with the kids about the Beatitudes right now. And it's just the attitudes of the heart. And so Jesus is walking people through, blessed is the poor in spirit, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are those who mourn, for you will be comforted. And so again, Jesus comes in and he walks into basically saying, let's flip flop what the world is saying, right? Like those things actually, you wouldn't ever Google blessed are the mourn because you're gonna be comforted. It's like, no, be happy. Like our world tells us, just be happy all the time. And happy is good and happy is our God. But it says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will see God, which is in alignment with what you're saying. And when you translate what that verse actually means, it's someone who doesn't have any bias or opinion, right? I'm here, to your point, like just totally in a flow state, surrendered. Like then I'm actually able to see God, because if I have bias or opinion, it's like my rose colored goggles. Like I see whatever it is that I want to see. So my opinion about the news, my opinion about the economic forecast, my opinion about this conversation actually can't see the truth in the room. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so my question to you is that because peace is anchored in a deeper knowing, because it's anchored in truth, because it's anchored in vision? Like what allows someone, or the river, or you and I in a day-to-day situation, to be able to flow in the midst of, right, the rocks and the obstacles and the economic news, like the literal things that are happening, not just the news? And how would be my question.
Well, I think if, and there again, it takes practice, but it's like, if you really think about life in general and as a believer in Jesus, it's like our time on earth is so minute relative to eternity. So all the things that happen on a daily, weekly, but monthly basis don't really matter. It matters to show up and be your best and be better every day. And yes, there are going to be situations and people and things that you don't like, but most people dwell on that and let that ruin their afternoon or their day.
Yeah.
Like, and it can be as small as someone cuts you off and then flicks you off, and then you're just mad for like hours. And you're like, that was just like, let it be for him. And you've probably done it, or you've cut someone off, or you've cut someone off and someone's cut you off. Like there again, it happens. But to live and like hold on to that, and you see that on bigger scales with individuals and coaching clients that you've worked with, where it's like they hold on to something, and they're again going back to that trauma of they hold on to it since they were 5, 10, 15, 20, and they're 40, 70, and they still hold on to that, as opposed to saying like, that was an experience. I don't want to experience that again, but I don't want that to define me. And how do I move on and live in a state of like, okay, like I'm aware of that situation and I never want to be in that situation again. Yeah. So I take it as information and knowledge, and then move forward.
Well, and it's interesting because even as you're saying that, it unpacks that scripture even more, because it doesn't say blessed are the peacekeepers. It says blessed are the peacemakers. Peacekeepers, I think what happens is we start to go to my point, and again, I am learning this, so I'm not an expert in this, but I've been right at war, if you will, at all times, or trying to take charge or control at all times. And so if I'm trying to like keep everything in alignment, right, it's to your point of that water, it's like I'm the one that's like just creating more barriers after more barriers after more barriers, which is like resisting, which is why then all of a sudden it explodes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like my life has been this ultimate, no, I'm going to put a barrier because that was your fault. And I'm going to put a barrier because I need to control it. And I'm going to put I was creating all of these because I was trying to like, just, do the things. And I think for a lot of people, I'm just trying to keep the peace and keep everybody happy and make sure everybody's happy and what happens is it's like, we're keeping the peace around us, but we're starting a war within us, you know, and what the Bible's actually directing us to is exactly what you're saying, which is I've got to make peace with this. So as I go, though things aren't as I wanted or as I planned, I have to make peace here. I have to be the one that's willing to, right? So I surrender my will and my way and my time. I have to be the one that says, look, I'm sorry. I have to be the one that moves on and lets go. And I think that's just challenging to do when we live in a world right now that is so combative.
Well, most people aren't equipped and don't understand. Like everybody has that ability, but they don't teach it. Like, you have to go seek it out and learn it, of like, how do you not allow something to affect you, you know, for days or weeks, and get it down to, hours or minutes or
So
seconds.
what's been your journey to do that? Like, what did
Well,
you
it's the
Google that? Did you Google how to
it's the
do what?
it's understanding of the choice of like, okay, like, how come, and I have family members that someone cuts them off, they flick them off, and then they're mad for like an hour. And I'm like, why do they hold on to that experience for so long? Or then they get somewhere and then they tell 10 other people of what happened. And you're like, it's such a waste of energy, a waste of time. So I think you take it down to a small experience, and you make those, bigger to your situation, and you're like, how do I collapse the time to allow that to affect me? Because if I'm affected and the energy is not in the right place, it prohibits my growth.
Yeah.
And so, like, a few podcasts ago, I talked about how I had the worst week ever. Well, I could sit in that for days or weeks and be like, this doesn't work and I'm so mad and all the things. And I'm like, but then, one, as a believer, then that has my heart, that has my attention, that has my life, money. And I need to put it on Jesus, of like, okay, like, those were experiences, not experiences I want to have again, but how do I put my attention and focus on what really matters?
Yeah.
And it can be, like, I remember driving home from Lake Havasu when we lived in Bend, and it was like we were 10 hours deep into it, 5 kids, and we're getting anxious.
No,
And
we were having fun.
yeah,
It was a perfect 17-hour drive when I was 5
like
months
15
pregnant.
or whatever it was. But so we were going home, and it was like, at some point I was like, okay, like, I'm gonna lash out at the kids or you, because I've got this energy built up. And so we pulled over, I think, to go to the bathroom or something. And I walked away, I don't know, maybe 50 feet or 20 feet or what. It wasn't super far, but it was like, and I just like screamed at the top of my lungs. And I think the kids, like, I think they jumped, and then they started laughing. I didn't see them, but what you were telling me is like, and I walked back, and they were like cracking up. They were like laughing at me. And it was like, I just needed to get that energy out. And so I was like, it's better to do that, because it's built up energy, as opposed to like yelling at you or the kids in a way that it's not going to help the next 4 hours of our car ride.
Which I think goes back to why peace is more of this internal game, right? Like, there's no way I can make peace in the world around me if I can't actually understand the war going on within me, right? As simple as being frustrated in the car, or as simple as like being out needing to process a conversation, is like, if I can't understand those triggers within me to know, like, I got to make peace with this internally so that I don't actually erupt at the world, which is, I think, what you're seeing in our world right now. I think you're seeing all of these massive eruptions is because people actually don't know how to make peace internally. And so the easiest, right, target is just someone else or something else. And it's escalating.
Most people want someone or something else to blame.
Yeah.
As opposed to taking personal responsibility and understanding what is going on inside me.
Yeah.
And then there again, if there's something that you can do about it, do something about it. But if there's not something, and there again, coming back to, and this is not political, but if your president doesn't win in this next election, don't let it ruin the next 4 years of your life. Like, it is what it is. Just understand what are their policies and how do you do the best within their policies. Because in 4 years, they're probably going to change again too.
Yeah.
So every 4 years, you could be, what you think is, oh, I'm happy because this president, and oh, I'm sad and I'm mad and frustrated because this. Yes, they change, tax laws, and they change things, and they waste money. But it's like, that's been going on forever.
Okay, so I have to ask this question then. So what's the line between being a peacemaker, right, and really walking in peace and flow versus passivity? Like, when do you know that you're taking a stance of peace and you're making peace and you're moving on, versus when I'm becoming apathetic and passive and not dealing? I'm just flowing. You're like, no, that's called avoidance. Like, what's the line? Because again, the Bible tells us, stand your ground. Jesus was very clear. He was in constant conflict with the world around him because he was in alignment with heaven. He wasn't in alignment with Earth's numbers and statistics, and right, the Pharisees had a way in which to live, and it was all built around the law. But here comes Jesus, and Jesus was in conflict with the law because he came to not say that the law was wrong. He just came to redeem us so we didn't have to live under the law.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we know now in our day-to-day life that we are being peaceful but not passive, peacemaking but not apathetic, flowing but not avoiding?
I think you know innately, like, are you just in a marriage, are you not saying what you want to say? And we've experienced this too, of like, there's certain things that I could say, but then I'm like, is it worth saying? And then there's certain things where I'm like, I have to say it, because if not, it's going to build up and I'm going to grow more resentful and frustrated. And if I keep compounding that, then it's like a mini bomb just building up inside of me.
And then do you know in that moment if you're frustrated because of opinion, or if you're frustrated because of something I actually did to you, or are you frustrated because of resentment and you've been holding it in, or is it something
Mhm.
that I've actually done to you?
Well, I think through my experience, I think most of the time when we're frustrated, it's something that we're not like doing.
The personal part, like the opposite person, or you as the
No.
individual?
Well, there again, like, if I say, Julie, I don't like when you do this, but then you keep doing it, then that's I asked you not to do something, but you keep doing it.
Yep.
So I can live in a peaceful state and be like, okay, she likes to do that anyway, even though she doesn't, she knows I don't like it. So I think there's difference of like, if I tell you I don't like something and you keep doing it, I'm going to probably say it again. Hey, Julia, we've talked about this. I don't like you doing this.
Yep.
Um, but if I don't say anything
And it just keeps building up
and it
within
keeps
you.
building up and building up, and
But
I'm
if you've
like,
had the conversation in your head 100 times and you feel like you've had the conversation out loud, even though you haven't,
mhm,
do you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
And then all of a sudden you're mad at me for a conversation that I wasn't included in. Like, how are you catching yourself real time on that? I'm just curious, because I think that so many times too, the problem with conversation or peace in general is that it's the illusion that the conversation happened.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there again, what am I not, what is going on inside me that I'm not peaceful about? And then you've got to unpack it of like, well, why am I not peaceful about this? What is rubbing me wrong about this situation or this person, or my job? Did I not do what I needed to do to release that and to get it out there
Mhm.
and talk to that individual? And most, I heard it the other day at the kids' class, and it was like these two ladies like talking about a situation, and it was like they talked for like 30 minutes about something. You're like, I almost said like, please go talk to that individual. Like, they are not here. Stop. Like, go do something about it. But you just wasted a lot of energy and effort. And I could tell she was emotionally like built up with energy, but you're like, that's such a waste of time. You're not peaceful. You're not going to live in a peaceful state because you're not going to the source.
And nor are you seeking to be better. You're seeking to be right. Like, it's
100%.
different if you're
Because
like,
then you
hey,
go to someone that's going to be like, oh, I
yeah.
know. Yeah,
It's not
totally.
like, hey, help me see what I can't see here. And I want to make sure I'm processing this with this
Mhm.
person well. And I want to be in my best state of mind when I'm doing it. You're actually just processing to be right.
100%. And unfortunately, some individuals like to do that because then it fuels their fire.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they're not happy, or frustrated all the time,
Yeah.
or judgmental, because it's like they're not understanding, like, it actually has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with you.
It's so good. Oh my gosh. This is a good one. So our question to you is, what do you think about peace? We're still talking about peace. We've actually talked about 3 other words in the middle of peace. You want to do one more?
Yeah, let's do one more. Let's make it, well, rapid fire. Let's just pick a couple and we'll just like
Rapid fire.
couple rapid fires. Oh, good.
Anxiety. We can't rapid fire. You got to come back to next
No,
episode.
anxiety.
We cannot.
Undealt peace.
Great. Anxiety is, I would say, unprocessed thought patterns. My turn.
No, you can't pit. You're looking.
I can't see, they're folded. Oh, sex.
What does it mean?
Sex is, I think it's I think it's one of the Oh man,
Quick. What does
I'm
it
like
mean?
having
What does
images
it
of my
mean?
husband in my head right now.
What does it mean?
Sex is a way to create greater bond in your intimacy. It's intimacy. It's a form of companionship and exploration and conversation without words, and something that I believe should be exclusive for a man and a woman who commit their forever relationship to God. I think it's something that um, keeps the marriage with their mind right and their heart right. And we should do this after this podcast.
Live in a peaceful state.
What do you think?
I agree with you.
You agree with me?
I agree with you. The only thing, here's what I would add. I think sex in a marriage changes over time.
I would agree.
And I think the conversation is probably one that is not had enough. And we've been married over 15 years. And I think it's something that you should do on, an annual basis, but just to checks and balance of like understanding the needs and wants by both individuals. And as you have kids and you grow and your time is spent differently, I think you're also like you change.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? The needs and desires of what it was when you first got married to 5 years into marriage to 15 years into marriage to 5 kids later. I think it changes. And I think that needs to be talked about more because it's money, it's sex, and what's the third one? Communication are the top reasons couples get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you break it down, like it's communication obviously is the foundation because then you can talk about money and then you can talk about sex.
Yeah. I think that's really good. And I'll never forget, just to kind of highlight this, I'll never forget, this was probably 4 years ago. And I remember the day that you said, let's talk about our sex life. And it was like, I don't even know. I couldn't even explain it to anything else because the funny thing is it's not like we're not having sex. So it's not like you caught me when I was 14 years old and your parents were like, hey, let's talk about sex. Like this really awkward conversation with your parents. But instantly, it was the first time that I remember you inviting me into a conversation about sex, which tactically speaking would make sense because it'd be like, what do you want for dinner? What do you like? What do you want? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it really should.
It should be table talk, like without your kids around. Yeah. It should just be like, hey,
what do you like? What do you not like? Think about it.
So sex tonight. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? Like we've got a few different choices. We got some options here.
We can try something new. Yeah. We can do every Monday. We
can go back to what we've done before.
Tacos,
like, what do you want?
It's like if you really think about it, but it was so funny because what it stimulated in me was this journey around that sex. Actually, growing up, and no harm, no foul, but in the conversation that I grew up, sex was very shamed, and so it wasn't actually explained as well as it could be. And so there was a lot of shame wrapped up in it. And so even here, you asking me this in a very spiritually bonded relationship that I still felt like, why do I feel shame in the fact that you're even asking me a question that really should be like, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. What are you going for dinner? But it started on this journey that I think you're spot on in that it's a conversation that is awkward until it's awesome. You have to get comfortable. And for me, it felt like, well, what if we're hurt feelings, or what if I can't perform? And you have to go through all of the weird head trash around ego, fear, perfectionism, shame, guilt. Like there's actually a lot there for people that I think that they don't always feel equipped to share with their spouse, that like having this conversation makes me feel like I need to do it a perfect way, or that you're not going to like it and then you're going to reject me, or why do I feel guilt if we're not having it enough, or if I don't want to have it, or like it just actually there's so much that I think comes up for people that if you're not equipped to know also how easy it could be, but how the weight of what that conversation could result in, it's also can be a weighty conversation.
100%. And there again, coming back to what your interpretation of the word is really defined by like how you grew up, or did your parents talk about it, or what did you learn about it in school, or did you have some, trauma or an emotional experience that happened to you? And so all of these things, it can mean so many different things to someone. And so just to have a conversation about it, like you said, it's like, hey, I like this, or I don't really like that anymore. It's like, it shouldn't mean anything against you. It's saying, how do we be better together?
Yeah.
As opposed to saying like, well, you're going to keep doing that, but I don't really like it, but let's keep doing it anyway.
Well, and what's fascinating is that there's an incredible organization, a nonprofit that is really doing its part to instill purity in the next generation. And they say that for animals, sex is instinctual. For humans, we actually learn it. So you learn it from the environment you grow up in, which is either they make it seem like no harm, no foul. Here's a condom, do your thing. They don't talk about it at all, and so they shame it, right? Or there's the godly presentation of it, of really helping understand it. People are learning it in school. They're learning it through movies. They're learning it through their friends. They learn it through their first experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this whole idea of actually wherever you're at in your sex life, in your marriage, is a byproduct of just some learned behaviors that you didn't actually know that you were learning along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually, to your point, as you start talking about it in marriage, it's that you don't always have to do what you've always done, right? You can actually get different results, but you have to lean in and kind of create, to your point, what do we like? What do you like? What do I like? Like what works for us in our marriage, as opposed to what I learned in church or what I learned at school or what I learned in sex ed. Like it's an unlearning process as much as it is a learning process.
Well, and there again, coming back to like your interpretation to my interpretation is based off of the experiences of whatever it is, whether I learned it from or talking to friends or watched something or whatever. You're like, you build up what it is and means to you, as opposed to saying, what does sex mean to you? Like when you first get married, that should be a conversation of like, okay, what does it mean to you? And, let's identify a few different like thoughts around it.
Yeah.
And then as you evolve and have that intimacy, then it's like you go deeper and deeper and saying, like, let's talk about it. And let's, just like within anything that you want to be better, like it's not okay. It doesn't mean anything against you to say, hey, like I really like when you do this or do more of this or do that. And I don't really like this.
Yeah.
And then there again, it's a compromise, because I think sex also can be like, hey, I like these things. And you're like, yeah, I don't really like them that much, but I like them because you like them.
I like what you like.
Yeah. So I think it's there again, it's not just like, here's what I like and here's what we're going to do.
Mhm.
It's like, no, what do you like? Okay. What do I like? And then it's like, how do you find that compromise? And there again, sex can look different, each time you have it,
Yeah.
or and change over the course of your marriage.
Yeah.
And so I think it is a conversation that should be had, and maybe it's a monthly conversation, or a 6-week or 6-month conversation of talking about, finances and money, talking about sex, and then communication of like, where am I not communicating enough? Because I think that does happen depending on, you're a verbal processor. I process in my head, and sometimes I'm like, I think we already had this conversation. And you're like, no, we didn't. I think you did. And so it's understanding like, okay, where am I not communicating enough so you feel involved in it? And then sometimes I'm like, Julia, like, I heard you, like you've said it so many times. And so it's finding that rhythm within a marriage, and it should be, and that maybe that's the challenge that I put out to everybody, is like, it should be, when you first get married, I think it should be, more often. As you are married longer, I think the durations, because you start to build the foundation of what you both believe.
You're saying not have sex more. You're talking about
No,
the conversation.
well, I think you should have sex more as you
I think you're
as you are
I just wanna
married
make sure-
longer. No,
yeah,
I'm just saying in general,
you're talking
having the
about
conversation.
conversations. Okay, great.
The conversations, because you're building that foundation.
Agreed. So
You're-
the conversations need to be more
about
frequent.
sex, about money, about communication, the
Early
communication
on. Agreed.
styles. And it should be like every month. And then after a couple years, then you move to every quarter. And then after 5-10 years, you can move it out because you're on the same page.
Yeah, you have a solid foundation.
Yeah, but
you're just changing the window curtains.
Yeah, exactly.
We're changing the dinner. We're
Exactly.
changing our routine this month. We're not having spaghetti every Monday. We're going to change.
But I would also say, and there again, it's not a topic of conversation when you're out with friends and stuff of like, hey, how often do you guys talk about sex and money? But I would also believe, based off of you working with a lot of different people, it's a conversation that is not really had.
Yeah. So there you have it. We hope that today we opened up an opportunity for you at Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner or New Year's to talk about peace, anxiety, and sex. What else could you talk about? Wealth. There was one more.
And trauma.
And trauma. Just pulling out of the hat. But more than anything, we just want you to realize that it's not just the word, it's the interpretation behind the word, and to include your family, your staff, your kids, your business partners in on this conversation, not only what the word is on paper, but what the word means to you, because
it matters.
It matters. Until next time. Hey there, ladies. And yes, I did say ladies. I have a question for you. Do you feel overwhelmed with uncertainty or a lack of clarity as you head into your day? Or maybe you struggle with the anxiety of wanting more, but not knowing how to make the necessary changes in the midst of being a mom, raising baby, grocery shopping, all the things. But you're ready. You're ready to wake up feeling focused and aligned with the dreams that God has given you so you can wholeheartedly pursue what matters most in your faith, family, and career. If that's you, then I want to gift you with a free mini course where I literally give you my morning routine for success. That's right. Being a mom of 5 under the age of 9, I know firsthand how important our mornings are. And with my proven faith-based daily routine, you too can align your actions and your dreams in just 15 minutes a day. This morning routine is not just about getting up early. It's about cultivating the right mindset, heart set, and dream set that will encourage you and equip you in arising and aligning every morning. Click on the link below and you can receive this free gift today. Don't spend the rest of your life just dreaming about the life you want. Arise to the challenge and create the life you want one morning at a time.